There is a particular kind of man that every city in Africa has learned to recognize. He walks into a room as if the room has been waiting for him. He smiles in the language of confidence. He dresses in the grammar of success. And he speaks, always, as if a camera somewhere is already rolling. Kofi Mensah Boateng was exactly this kind of man. At 29 years old, he was a digital marketing consultant operating out of a shared co-working space in the Osu neighborhood of Accra, Ghana. He did not own the desk he sat at. He did not own the Wi-Fi he used. But he had 11,000 followers on Instagram, a YouTube channel he called The Accra Hustle, and a personal brand that announced to the world, "I have arrived." The truth, if you looked at his bank statement, would tell a different story. But Kofi did not look at his bank statement very often. What he looked at, what he checked, sometimes 40 or 50 times a day, was the number, the follower count, the likes, the comments that said, "You inspire me, bro. You are gold. Bro, how do you do it?" And Kofi would know that his phone screen, like a man receiving a medal he had earned. Never mind that the photo he had just posted, him sitting inside a luxury car, was not his car. Never mind that the restaurant behind him in his last story was a place he had only entered to take photos in. Never mind any of that. The number was going up. And when the number goes up, a certain kind of person mistakes that for the sound of progress. He had built his entire identity on what people believed he was. The problem was, he had started to believe it too. His co-working neighbors knew him as the loud one. Not in a bad way, loud in the way of someone who has decided that being heard is the same as being important. He had opinions about everything. Marketing trends in Lagos, the state of Afrobeats, the best neighborhoods to invest in, the problem with young Ghanaians who are afraid to take risks. He loved to talk about risk. What Kofi was actually good at, and let us be fair to him, was seeing things. He had a genuine eye for what would travel on social media. He could look at a business and immediately understand what story it needed to tell to attract customers. This was a real skill. This was God-given. He had taken 3 businesses from obscurity to visibility in under a year, and those clients were grateful. But Kofi had a habit that was quietly eating the foundation of everything he built. He overpromised. Not because he was a liar, because he was genuinely in love with the version of himself that could do anything. When a client asked him, "Can you handle our full social media presence, content strategy, SEO, and paid ads simultaneously?" Kofi would say yes. Then he would figure out what SEO was later. When a client asked, "Can you deliver these results in 3 weeks?" he would say yes. Then he would stay awake for 4 nights and produce something that looked like results, but was not quite results. He was running on the fuel of his own enthusiasm. And enthusiasm is a powerful fuel, but it burns fast and it leaves no residue. His best friend, Sena Aje, was everything Kofi was not. Sena worked for a fintech startup as a back-end developer. He came to work at 7 in the morning. He left at 6. He did not post about his life. He did not talk about his ambitions at co-working spaces. On weekends, he went to his mother's house in Tema and helped her in the garden. He read. He saved 20% of his salary every month without fail. Not because it was easy, but because he had decided it was necessary. Kofi found Sena's life deeply boring, and he said so often, in the gentle way that people use when they are actually saying something cruel. "Sena, my brother, you are wasting your youth. Nobody remembers the man who played it safe. People remember the man who moved bold." Sena would look at Kofi the way an old tree looks at a leaf caught in wind. Patient, unbothered. "I remember the man who paid my mother his hospital bill last year," Sena said once. "I was that man. I was ready because I had prepared. That is the only boldness I understand." Kofi laughed it off. He laughed off many things. Mami Akwa, his girlfriend of 2 years, noticed the laughter. She also noticed what came after the laughter, the silence when they were alone, the restlessness when Kofi was not performing for someone. the way he seemed most alive when he was being watched and most lost when he was not. She had told him this once, carefully, the way you tell someone they have something in their teeth, trying to help without embarrassing them. Kofi, I feel like sometimes you are more present on your phone than you are with me. He kissed her forehead and said, that's how the business works, baby. You will understand when we scale. She did not bring it up again. But she filed it in the place in her heart where women keep the things they have decided to watch. Something was coming. Something always comes for the man who outgrows his truth before he has grown into his character. It arrived on a Thursday afternoon in the form of a call Kofi almost did not take. He was in the middle of editing a reel, adjusting the captions, trimming the transitions, when the screen lit up with a number he did not recognize. He almost ignored it. Then something made him answer. Am I speaking with Kofi Mensah Boateng, the digital consultant? The voice was measured, the kind of voice that had made decisions that mattered. Yes, this is Kofi. How can I help? My name is Richard Tete. I own Tete Group, retail, logistics, and some real estate. Your work for Agio Fabrics came across my desk. I want to meet with you. Kofi put his phone down very slowly after the call ended. Then he picked it up and called Sena. Sena, Tete Group just called me. A pause. The Tete Group, Richard Tete? Yes. Another pause. Then Sena said something Kofi would only understand months later. Be careful, Kofi. Big contracts are not just opportunities, they are also tests. Kofi laughed. He was already calculating numbers in his head. He was already writing the Instagram caption. The offices of Tete Group occupied the top 2 floors of a building in Airport City, the kind of building where the elevator was silent and the receptionist spoke in 3 languages, and the air itself seemed to understand that this was a place of serious business. Kofi wore his best outfit. He had borrowed a watch from a friend, a subtle gold piece that communicated success without shouting it. He had rehearsed his pitch. He had prepared case studies. He had done his research. For once, he had prepared properly. Mr. Tete was a compact, calm man of 51. He had the energy of someone who had nothing left to prove and everything left to protect. He did not waste words. He did not look at Kofi's outfit. He looked at Kofi's eyes. Tell me what you would do differently for a brand that already has recognition but is losing relevance among customers under 35. He said, no preamble, no small talk. Kofi spoke for 22 minutes. He was brilliant, genuinely, authentically brilliant. He mapped a content strategy, a community building approach, an influencer integration plan. He spoke about the psychology of the younger consumer in Accra, Kumasi, Takoradi. He told Mr. Tete things about his own customer base that he did not know. At the end, Mr. Tete nodded once. 6 months, full digital overhaul. I need measurable growth, not vanity metrics, real traffic, real conversions. Can you do this? Kofi looked at the man, he looked at the room, he looked at the contract figure he had caught a glimpse of at the corner of Mr. Tete's desk. He said yes. He said yes, knowing he had never managed a campaign of this size. He said yes, knowing the deliverables were beyond what he personally had executed before. He said yes because yes felt like destiny and no felt like defeat. The yes that comes from fear of missing out is always more expensive than the opportunity it was trying to catch. The first month was exhilarating. Kofi built a small team, 2 young freelancers he found through referrals, a photographer named Emmanuel, and a part-time copywriter named Yvonne. He set up project boards, he created timelines, he held meetings in coffee shops and co-working spaces, and the calls were long and full of ideas, and it genuinely felt like the beginning of something real. He posted about the journey, not the specifics, he was careful about NDAs, but the feeling, the energy of building, the season of growth. His followers responded hungrily. The number climbed past 15,000. Mami Akwa watched him come home excited, watched him glow with purpose, and she thought maybe this was it. Maybe this was the project that would make him steady. But by the 5th week, the cracks appeared. Emmanuel, the photographer, delivered images 3 days late for the second campaign cycle. Kofi did not address it directly. He had trouble confronting people he liked. Instead, he worked through the night to compensate. He wrote some of the copy himself, stayed up doing it, and did not tell the client. The analytics from the first month were promising but not exceptional. Kofi repackaged them in his report, technically accurate but presented in a way that made moderate numbers look like momentum. Mr. Tete read the report without a word. He sent a single email in reply. Thank you. Month 2 deliverables by the 15th. Kofi read that email and felt something cold and brief pass through him. He ignored it. He ordered himself a celebratory jollof rice and told himself things were on track. It was into this season of managed chaos that Auntie Efua arrived. She was his mother's older sister, and she had come from the Volta region, from Hohoe, where she had spent 30 years as the headmistress of a local secondary school before retirement. She was the kind of woman who had spent her life watching young people with potential waste themselves and had developed as a result an extraordinary patience and an even more extraordinary silence. She came to Accra for a medical appointment. She was staying in Kofi's spare room for 2 weeks. Kofi was not particularly worried about this. Auntie Efua was harmless. She was old. She did not understand social media or personal branding or the economics of the creator economy. She would cook, she would go to her appointment, she would watch television, and she would leave. He was catastrophically wrong about all of this. On her 3rd day in Accra, she came and sat beside him in the living room while he was editing content. She looked at his screen for a while without speaking. He explained what he was doing, using the words he used for clients: engagement rates, content calendar, conversion funnel. She listened. Then she asked one question. My son, if all of this disappeared tomorrow, the phone, the followers, the internet, what would be left of the work you are building? Kofi laughed. He said, Auntie, that is not how the world works anymore. She nodded slowly and went back to the kitchen. She did not press. She planted and she left it. The questions we laugh off are often the ones that find us at 3 in the morning when the Wi-Fi is off and the phone is dark and only the truth is awake. The real conversation happened on a Saturday. Kofi had come home frustrated. He had a deliverable due Monday and the freelancers were not producing what he needed. He had been on calls all day. He sat at the dining table with his laptop and his phone and his half-eaten food, and the general disorder of a man whose life has become a series of fires he is managing instead of a direction he is building. Auntie Efua sat across from him with her Bible and her reading glasses. After a long silence, she said, You are tired, Kofi. Not a question. I am fine, Auntie, just walking. She turned a page. When last did you sleep before midnight? He did not answer. When last did you sit with Mami and not look at your phone? Silence. When last did you sit with yourself? Kofi closed his laptop. He sat back. He felt suddenly very young, the way you feel young when an elder looks at you without judgment, and for that reason with more power than any rebuke. I am trying to build something, Auntie. I know. I have watched many builders. She closed her Bible. There are 2 kinds. The one who builds what is necessary, and the other who builds what is impressive. The first one's house stands. The second one's house is always beautiful in photographs. A pause. The difference, my son, is the foundation. What is your foundation? Not the strategy, the foundation. What is this for? Who does this serve? What do you stand on when the contract ends and the client is gone and the followers have moved to the next thing? Kofi did not answer. Not because he did not want to, because he genuinely in that moment did not know. Maame Akwa was on the night shift at the hospital that Saturday. When she came home early Sunday morning, she found Kofi still at the dining table, asleep over his laptop. She stood there looking at him for a long time. She looked at the dark circles that had appeared under his eyes over the past month. She looked at the unwashed dishes in the sink that she had told him about twice. She looked at the unopened card she had left on the counter for their 2-year anniversary 2 weeks ago. He had thanked her, briefly, then gone back to his phone. She made herself tea and sat on the balcony and thought. Maame was not an angry woman. She was a clear-eyed woman, and there is a difference. She did not build resentment, she built conclusions. And the conclusion she was building slowly and reluctantly was that she was in a relationship with a man's ambition, not with the man. She thought about the early days, before the contract, before the 15,000 followers, when Kofi would cook for her on Sunday evenings and they would sit on the floor and eat and talk about nothing and everything. When he would come to the hospital with food on her long shifts, when he would ask about her patients and actually listen. She still loved that version of him. She was no longer sure that version existed anymore. The people who love us most do not always leave with noise. Sometimes they leave quietly, in degrees, piece by piece, like sand from a hand. And by the time we notice, the hand is empty. The second month report was the moment the story turned. Kofi had worked with a ferocity he had never applied to anything in his life. He had pushed his team. He had rewritten campaigns 3 times. He had cut his sleep to 5 hours, then 4. He had cancelled plans with Maame twice. He had eaten at his desk. He had prayed, genuinely, not performatively, in ways he had not prayed since he was a boy preparing for exams he was afraid of. The results were mixed. The social media presence was genuinely improved. The content quality was excellent. The community engagement was up by 38%. But the conversion numbers, the thing that Mr. Tete had been clearest about, the real traffic, the actual sales pipeline, those were not moving the way the contract required. The problem was not Kofi's creativity. The problem was that the brand had deeper structural issues, pricing, distribution, customer experience, that no social media strategy could fix in 60 days. Kofi knew this. He had seen it in the first month, but he had not said it. He had convinced himself he could compensate. He could not. He built the second month report with the care of a man assembling a boat in a storm. He was honest about some things. He softened other things. He framed the conversion problem as a delayed cycle, normal for brand transformation, he wrote, results compounding. He sent it. He waited. Mr. Tete read it over a weekend. On Monday morning at 7:15 a.m., Kofi's phone rang. Come to the office, today, 4 p.m. Not come when you are free. Not let us schedule a call. Today, 4 p.m. Kofi stared at his phone for a full minute, and he felt the specific dread of a man who has been building a performance instead of a product, and now the audience has turned on the lights. Mr. Tete did not raise his voice. That was the worst part. He sat across from Kofi with the contract on the desk and the report side by side, and he spoke the way a man speaks when he has already decided something and is only choosing the kindest way to say it. Kofi, you are talented. I mean that genuinely. But I hired a professional and I got an enthusiast. There is a difference. Kofi opened his mouth. Let me finish. He closed it.
The work on the content side is strong. I will acknowledge that. But you knew from month 1 that the conversion issue was a structural problem you couldn't solve from where you were standing. You had the information. A professional tells the client the truth, even when the truth is uncomfortable. You chose to manage my impression instead of managing my business. You chose the appearance of progress over the reality of it. I have been in business for 23 years. I know the difference between these two things the way I know the difference between water and kerosene. They look similar in a glass, but you only find out which one you have been drinking when something ignites. Mr. Tete slid a paper across the desk. It was an amended contract. 2 months remaining, reduced scope, reduced fee, performance contingent completion. I am not ending the contract. I am resetting it on terms that are honest. If you are willing to work on those terms, honestly, without performance, I am willing to continue. If not, there is no judgment, but I need the truth from here. Kofi looked at the paper for a long time. He signed it. He walked out of that building feeling the specific deflation of a man whose self-image has just been revised by reality. He sat in his car for 20 minutes without starting the engine. He did not post anything. He did not call anyone. He just sat with it. Pride is the heaviest thing a young man carries and the last thing he lets go of. But sometimes the letting go is what saves him. He drove home to tell Mommy. She was home, a rare thing on a weekday. She had swapped a shift. She was cooking. The apartment smelled like groundnut soup and he stood at the door for a moment, just in the smell of it, before he came in. He told her everything. Not the curated version, not the spin, the whole thing. The overpromising, the managing impressions, the sleepless nights, the amended contract, the reduced fee. She stirred the pot and listened without interrupting. When he finished, she served the food and they sat. Then she said, Kofi, I want to tell you something and I need you to hear it as a person who loves you. He said, tell me. I have been watching you become someone I don't always recognize, and I kept telling myself it was the pressure, it was the hustle, it was a season. But today, listening to you, I realized the problem is not the pressure. The pressure only showed you something that was already there. She looked at him. You have been building a character, Kofi, not a life. The work is about how it makes you look. The relationship is about how it looks. The apartment, you pay for a one-bedroom that costs more than you earn some months because of how it looks. You are exhausting yourself performing for an audience that will not be there when the bill comes. He said nothing. I am not leaving you, but I need you to know I cannot keep waiting for the real Kofi to come back from the performance. I am a nurse. I deal with what is real every single day. I need that in my home too. He took her hand. He held it. He did not have words, which was unusual, but it was also, if he was honest, a relief to not have words, to not be performing, to just hold the hand of someone who was still choosing him despite the evidence. It was Auntie Efua who arranged it. On the following Sunday, before she returned to Hoho, Kofi asked her to drive her to church. He agreed, expecting a quiet service and a quick escape. What he got was Pastor Osei. The man was 64, short, with the precise movements of someone who has survived so much that the body has learned economy. He was a family friend, had known Kofi since he was in primary school. After the service, they sat in the pastor's small office with 3 plastic chairs and the smell of old hymnals and Auntie Efua's deliberate presence. The pastor looked at Kofi the way elders look at young men they have been watching from a distance, not with surprise, but with recognition. Kofi, your auntie tells me you are in a moment of difficulty. Not difficulty exactly. Difficulty, the pastor repeated. Let us call it what it is so that we can pray for it correctly. Auntie Efua sat with her hands folded. She said nothing. She was the most powerful silent presence Kofi had ever encountered. Pastor Osei said, he told them the problem is not your speed. The problem is that you are using your speed to outrun yourself, and the self is very patient. It waits at every destination. Kofi sat still. I was 41 years old when I lost everything I had built. My first business, my savings, most of my reputation, because I was building for an audience instead of building on a principle. I knew what was right. I made choices that looked right. There is a difference, and God and the market know it. He leaned forward. You are 29. You are not finished, but you are at the junction every serious person must face. The moment you decide what you are actually building, not the brand, the man. Who is the man inside the brand?
What does he owe the people who are in his orbit? What kind of builder is he really? The question was not what Kofi was going to do next. The question was who he was going to become. And that question does not have a LinkedIn post as its answer. That evening, Kofi drove to Sena's apartment in Tema. He had not been there in 4 months. He realized this as he stood at the door. 4 months since he had visited his best friend outside of a co-working space or a restaurant where he was already being seen by people he wanted to impress. Sena opened the door in a worn t-shirt and reading glasses. Behind him was his small, organized living room, a full bookshelf, a plant that was thriving, his laptop open to what looked like documentation. They sat. Sena made tea. Kofi talked. He said everything. The contract, Mami, Auntie Afua, Pastor Ose, the follower count that suddenly felt like it was counting something he didn't want anymore. Sena listened completely, without his phone, without the urge to respond before the sentence was finished. When Kofi finished, Sena served the food and they sat. Then he said, Kofi, I want to tell you something and I need you to hear it as a person who loves you. Kofi said, tell me. I have been watching you start running faster and faster and I kept wondering what you were running from. Because you were running from something, not to something. The posting, the client pitches you couldn't fully deliver, the lifestyle you were projecting, it all felt like a man trying to stay ahead of a version of himself he was afraid to admit he was still becoming. A long silence. You have real talent, Kofi. I have always believed that. But talent without discipline is just potential. And potential is what everyone has before they decide to do the work. The work, the honest, unglamorous, nobody is watching work, that is what builds something that lasts. Kofi asked quietly, why didn't you say this before? Sena said, I did. Every time you called me boring, every time you said I was playing it safe, I was just saying it in a language you were not ready to hear yet. He got home at midnight. Mami was asleep. Auntie Afua had left that afternoon, a quiet departure, a hand on his shoulder, the kind of goodbye that is also an instruction. He sat on the balcony with his phone. He opened Instagram. 16,212 followers. The number that had been his compass, his thermometer, the daily measurement of whether he was winning or losing. He looked at it for a long time, and for the first time, the number felt like nothing. Not a small nothing, a profound, bottomless nothing, like looking at a trophy you realized you had won in a competition you designed to make yourself feel good. He thought about Mr. Tete's words, you chose the appearance of progress over the reality of it. He thought about Mami's words, you are building a character, not a life. He thought about Auntie Afua's question, if all of this disappeared tomorrow, what would be left? He put the phone face down on the railing and looked at the Accra skyline. The city was still moving below him, the lights of late-night traffic, the sound of music from somewhere several streets away, the specific hum of a city that never quite sleeps. He had come to this city to win something. He was only now beginning to understand what winning actually meant. He sat there till 2 a.m. He did not post about it. And in the quiet of not performing, something in him that had been holding its breath for a long time finally exhaled. The next morning, Kofi made a list. Not a content calendar, not a pitch deck, a list of questions he had never seriously answered. What do I actually want to do with marketing? Specifically, what kind of work do I find genuinely interesting rather than lucrative looking? What can I honestly do well, alone, without overselling my capacity? What kind of clients am I suited to serve at this stage of my career? What am I building toward in 5 years? Not in terms of followers, but in terms of a life I would be comfortable describing to my children someday. He wrote for an hour. He crossed things out. He started over. He wrote badly and honestly, which was more useful than writing well and impressively. He called Mr. Tete that morning, before 9 a.m. Mr. Tete, I want to have a conversation I should have had in month 1. I have some things I need to tell you about the campaign, about what I can and cannot do, and about what I think you actually need, which is different from what I promised you. A pause on the line. Come in at 2. The meeting lasted 90 minutes. Kofi was honest in a way that cost him. He outlined the structural barriers he had identified. He explained that the conversion problem was not primarily a marketing failure. It was a customer experience issue that marketing was being asked to paper over. He named what he could do with excellence. He named what he could not do and suggested who could. Mr. Tete listened. He asked 3 sharp questions. Then he said, "This is the conversation I was waiting for you to have with me. In my experience, the consultants who admit their limits are the ones worth keeping. The ones who cannot, they eventually cost me more than their fees." He restructured the remaining engagement around Kofi's actual strengths. The fee was lower, but it was real, and the work that came from it was the best Kofi had ever done. Kofi started visiting Senna on Sundays. Not for anything formal. He would bring food, jollof from his mother's recipe, which Mame had finally taught him properly. And they would eat, and Senna would be doing whatever Senna was doing, and Kofi would sit in the company of someone who was quietly, undramatically building a life. It was uncomfortable at first. The silence of another person's disciplined life is its own kind of mirror. Kofi noticed Senna's bookshelf, organized by category, annotated with small sticky notes. He noticed Senna's budget sheet, visible one evening on his laptop before Senna closed it. Every income and expense tracked, every savings target highlighted in green. He noticed that Senna woke up at the same time every day, including weekends. He noticed that Senna was learning Portuguese on a language app, had been for 6 months, because there was a project opportunity with a Mozambican fintech company he was preparing for. "You planned for that a year ago," Senna said. Incredulous. Senna looked up from his book. "Some things take a year of preparation. I like to be ready." Kofi thought about all the times he had said yes to things that needed a year of preparation and given them 3 weeks. He thought about all the opportunities he had gotten because he was bold enough to pursue them, and all the opportunities he had squandered because he was not patient enough to execute them properly. He said, "Senna, do you think I am behind?" Senna put his book down. "Behind what?" "Behind where I should be at 29. Senna thought for a moment. "I think you have spent 4 years running a race where you invented the track and the finish line and the crowd. Now you are asking if you are behind in the actual race of your actual life. They are different races. You are not behind. You are just starting to run the right one." This hit Kofi in the chest in a way he felt physically. He sat with it for a while. He did not immediately try to put it into a caption. That was progress. Growing up does not always look like achievement. Sometimes it looks like sitting quietly in the home of a disciplined friend and letting their life teach you what your pride refused to learn. 3 weeks into his rebuilding, Kofi asked Mame to take a Saturday for them. No phones, no plans, just a day. She agreed carefully, the way someone agrees who is hoping for something but has stopped expecting it. They drove to Aburi, up into the hills, where the air changes and the city stops reaching you. They walked. They bought food from a roadside seller. They sat on a rock overlooking the valley and ate with their hands and talked, slowly without agendas. Kofi said, "I want to apologize to you properly. Not a sorry that moves us past the moment.
An actual apology. She looked at him. I have been so focused on what people outside our relationship thought of me that I stopped taking care of what was inside it. I missed our anniversary. I dismissed your concerns. I made you feel like you are competing with a phone for my attention. None of that was okay. And it wasn't a phase. It was a pattern, and I want to change the pattern, not just the behavior. She was quiet for a moment. Then, I hear you. And then, what does the change actually look like? He told her. He told her about the list, about the Sunday conversations with Sena, about the honest meeting with Mr. Tete, about sitting on the balcony and looking at 16,000 followers and feeling nothing, about wanting to build something that would still be there on a Tuesday when no one was watching. She listened. She reached over and took a handful of his groundnuts and ate them without saying anything. And then she leaned against his shoulder. She said, quietly, I fell in love with you because you see things other people miss. That is still true. But what I need is for you to see me with the same attention you give everything you are trying to build. He said, I am learning how to do that. She said, then keep learning. I will be here. The Tete contract concluded at the end of month 5, not the original 6-month plan, but a revised, reoriented version that had produced results both parties could honestly name. Mr. Tete called Kofi on the final day. Kofi, the content we produced in these last 3 months, the honest months, brought in more qualified leads than the first 2 combined. I want you to know that, and I want you to know why. Because the work was aligned. You are doing what you could genuinely do, and people can feel it. Consumers feel it. It comes through the screen. He paused. I will refer you to 2 people, but only if you continue working with the same honesty you found in month 3. The moment you go back to managing impressions instead of managing results, you will lose more than a contract. You will lose the reputation that is starting to be real. Kofi thanked him. He put the phone down. He opened Instagram. His thumb hovered over the camera icon. He wanted to post. He could feel the old impulse, the need to translate the win into content, to let 16,000 people know that the contract had concluded, that things were looking up, that the journey continues. He stared at the screen for a full minute. Then he closed the app. He put the phone in his bag. He stood up from his desk. He walked to the window of the co-working space and looked at the street below and felt something clean and rare, a private joy that did not need an audience to become real. He called Mami instead. It is done. Can we go for food tonight? Just us? She said yes. The most significant growth is the kind no one sees. The decision made quietly. The victory celebrated privately. The man becoming in the dark what he only pretended to be in the light.
6 months after the Tete contract closed, Kofi Mensah Boateng had a very different life than the one he had been performing. His follower count had dropped to 14,300. He had posted less. He had stopped using borrowed aesthetics. When he posted now, it was usually something functional, a marketing insight, a lesson from a campaign, an honest observation. The engagement rate was actually higher. The people who stayed were people who were there for the substance. He had 2 regular clients, not 8, 2. He had chosen them carefully based on what he could genuinely deliver with excellence. The money was not as much as he had once imagined he would be making at 29, but it was reliable, and for the first time he was not hiding his income from his bank statements. He had taken a night class in data analytics, not because it was flashy, but because he recognized it as the gap in his actual skills. He sat in that class as a student, without performance, occasionally confused, asking questions that exposed his gaps. It was uncomfortable, and he kept going. The co-working space where he still worked had started to know a different version of him. He had become, without intending to, something of a resource. People came to him for honest marketing opinions, not because he was the loudest, but because they had noticed that what he said matched what he did. He thought about that sometimes, how quickly reputation shifts when you stop performing. 4 months after her visit, he received a letter from Auntie Efua. An actual letter, handwritten, folded into an envelope with a stamp from the Volta region. He read it at his desk at the co-working space and then went to the bathroom because the letter made him cry and he did not want to cry in front of people. The letter said in part, "My son Kofi, I did not come to Accra to inspect you. I came for my appointment and God arranged the rest. I watched you for 2 weeks and I saw what your family sees but is too polite to say. A gifted young man running so fast from his own ordinariness that he has not stopped to discover what is extraordinary about him. Not the brand, not the followers, the actual thing. The thing that made Mr. Tete call you in the first place. The thing that made Mame stay. The world is full of performers. What it needs, what it has always needed, are builders. Men and women who do the work that needs doing, without applause, without the guarantee of recognition, because it is the right work and they are the right ones to do it. You are one of those people. I knew it when you were 8 years old and you tried to explain to me why our village needed a community notice board so information could travel better. You did not want attention then, you wanted connection to work. Remember that boy. He knew something the young man on Instagram forgot. Build honestly, love honestly, rest, eat, call your mother. She worries even when she does not say so. Your Auntie Efua. He read the letter twice. He folded it and put it in the inside pocket of his jacket, close. What the elders know that the young resist is that the slow path is not the cautious path, it is the durable one. And durability, not visibility, is what separates the builders from the billboards. The following month, Sena received the Mozambique project offer. It was a 6-month remote collaboration with a Maputo-based fintech company, 3 times his current salary, fully remote. He had been building toward it for 18 months. He had learned Portuguese, he had studied the regulatory environment, he had researched the team, he had prepared. When he told Kofi over the phone, Kofi sat quietly for a moment. Then he said, "Sena, I owe you an apology." "For what?" "For every time I implied your life was boring, for every time I suggested you are not taking enough risk. You are taking the most important risk there is. You are investing in becoming actually ready. I mistook your patience for passivity. That was my mistake, not your limitation." Sena was quiet on the line. Then, "Thank you. That means something coming from you." "No, thank you for not arguing with me, for showing me instead." They were quiet together for a moment. The particular quiet of 2 friends who have known each other long enough to have a silence that means something. Then Sena said, "Come for food before I leave. Bring Mami. We'll celebrate properly." They did. It was a Sunday evening in Tema, in Sena's mother's house in the backyard under the mango tree. Sena's mother made contomere stew and fried plantain. Mami brought wine. Kofi brought nothing except himself, which was, he was learning, always enough. They stayed until late. Kofi did not take out his phone once. Now, let us sit together for a moment as we come to the place in every folk tale where the story becomes the lesson. Because that is what the folk tale always does, not with a moral dropped at the end like a stone in water, but with a truth that has been swimming through the whole story, surfacing here and there, diving again, until at the end you realize you are always swimming with it. What is the truth of Kofi's story? It is this.
there is a cost to building on noise. Noise is not a foundation. Noise is a material that feels solid until weight is applied. The number of followers is noise. The aesthetic of the lifestyle is noise. The reputation built on overpromising is noise. The relationship sustained by performance is noise. It all sounds like something, it even feels like something. But when the weight of real stakes arrives, a serious client, a serious partner, a serious crisis, noise collapses. Kofi Mensah Boateng was not a bad man. He was a talented man who had confused the sound of progress for progress itself. He was a man who had learned that attention is currency and forgotten that currency is not wealth. He was a man who had to lose the performance before he could find the person. And here is the thing the story wants you to hold. He was not exceptional in his mistake. That is the whole point. Walk through any city on this continent, Lagos, Nairobi, Accra, Dar es Salaam, Abidjan, Cape Town, and you will find 10,000 Kofis, men and women who are brilliant and running, performing and exhausted, posting and hollow. Not because they are bad people, but because they are people in a world that rewards the appearance of success more immediately than it rewards the substance of it. And it takes a particular kind of courage or a particular kind of loss to choose substance when appearance keeps getting the applause. The city will always cheer the performance. The question is what you build after the crowd goes home.
The first lesson is about the yes that comes from ego. When Kofi said yes to Mr. Tete's contract, he said it because no felt like defeat. But the no that names your limits honestly is always cheaper than the yes that cannot deliver. Learn to make honest assessments of your capacity. Say yes from your actual ability, not from your desired image of yourself. The second lesson is about the difference between visibility and credibility. Visibility says, I am here. Credibility says, I can be trusted here. These are not the same thing. The digital world has trained a generation to pursue the first while neglecting the second, and the mistake only becomes visible when something real is at stake. The third lesson is about the danger of managing impressions instead of managing reality. Every time Kofi presented favorable numbers instead of true ones, every time he framed things to look better rather than to be better, he was training himself in a skill that would eventually betray him. Impression management is a debt. Reality always collects. The fourth lesson is about the people who love us quietly. Mame did not leave. Sena did not abandon. Auntie Efua did not condemn. Pastor Osei did not lecture. These people, the ones who stay and watch and wait and speak once and then step back and let the lesson arrive on its own time, these are the ones we are most likely to take for granted while they are present and most likely to mourn when they are gone. Honor the steady ones. They are doing something for you that does not always have a name. The fifth lesson is about discipline as the deepest form of ambition. Sena did not move fast, but he moved with intention. He saved 20% every month. He learned Portuguese for a job that had not yet been offered. He prepared for wait before the wait arrived. This is not caution. This is a superior form of daring, the daring to invest in a future that cannot be posted about yet. The sixth lesson is about the private joy. The moment Kofi put the phone down and called Mame instead of posting, that was the beginning of a life, not a brand, a life. The discipline to let some good things be only yours, to not need every achievement witnessed to make it real, that is a maturity that no number of followers can give you. The seventh and deepest lesson is about what foundation really means.
The elders, Auntie Efua, pastors say they kept returning to this question: what are you building on? Not what are you building, what are you building on? The platform you are building on determines the height you can safely reach. Build on noise and there is a ceiling. Build on integrity, on honest skill, honest relationship, honest self-knowledge, and the ceiling begins to disappear. The story of Kofi Mensah Boateng does not end with triumph. It ends with something better: direction. He is still in Accra. He is still at the co-working space, although he has moved to a slightly cheaper desk and redirected the savings toward the data analytics course he is finishing in 2 months. He still has Instagram. He posts every few weeks now, things that are true and earned and occasional. His follower count has stabilized around 15,000 and he has stopped monitoring it daily. He and Mame went to a weekend in Cape Coast, just the two of them. They walked through the castle and stood at the door of no return, and it was heavy in the way that history is always heavy, and they stood together in the weight of it, present, not performing, and it was one of the most real hours of Kofi's adult life. He calls Auntie Efua every 2 weeks. She always answers before the 3rd ring. She always asks the same question: are you resting? He is learning to say yes, honestly, which means he is also learning to actually rest. He saw Sena virtually last week. Sena is thriving in Maputo, learning to cook Portuguese food, occasionally sending Kofi photos of the ocean from his apartment window with captions that say things like, "Discipline tastes like this." Kofi screenshots everyone. Mr. Tete referred him to one of the 2 people he promised. The engagement is smaller than the original Tete contract. Kofi did not overpromise in the pitch. He said, "Here is what I am excellent at. Here is what I am still developing. Here is what I will deliver and when. Here is what I will tell you if something goes off track." The client said, "That is the most honest pitch I have received in a year." He got the contract. Honesty does not always cost you the room. Sometimes, more often than the afraid version of you believes, it is the thing that earns you the room. There is a reason the African folktale has survived 10,000 years of history. It is not because it is entertaining, though it is. It is not because it is dramatic, though it can be. It has survived because it refuses to lie about what a life costs. The folktale does not tell you the journey is easy. It tells you the journey is necessary. It does not promise you a hero's arrival. It shows you the stumble, the wandering, the moment of reckoning, the return, and asks you to sit with all of it, because all of it is the story. What Kofi's story knows, what this modern folktale from the streets of Accra knows, is something that no algorithm can teach you: that the most valuable thing you will ever build is not a following, it is a self. A self that can be trusted, a self that shows up the same on a Tuesday morning as it does in a meeting with an important client, a self that does not need to perform in order to exist, a self that the people who love you can find without a search. That self takes time. It requires loss and correction and quiet conversation on balconies. It requires elders who ask the right question just once and then let you carry it. It requires friends who show you a different way of being in the world without preaching. It requires partners who name what is happening without catastrophizing it. It requires the painful mercy of a client who tells you the truth because they believe you can handle it. It requires you to put the phone down, just sometimes, not forever, just enough to remember that the life is the thing, not the document of the life. So, if you are somewhere in Kofi's story, not necessarily at the beginning, maybe in the middle, maybe just now beginning to hear the questions Auntie Efua planted, then take this folktale as the sound of your own knowing, arriving from outside for once so you can hear it clearly. You are not behind. You are not broken. You are building.
The question is always the same question. In Hohoe and Accra and Lagos and London and every place where a young person is trying to become something real, what are you building on? Build honestly, love honestly, rest. The city can wait.